Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from our IT Visualizer channel. Here we're continuing our lab, the Matrix Labs, the video number 126. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We are still working with troubleshooting Windows using remote tools like exec. We have discussed before how we can troubleshoot Windows using command shell or remote command shell prompt. In the previous video, we have seen some scenarios created by Claude 3.7 Sonnet concerning how we can troubleshoot Windows using exec. The problem was the last video. The case created by Claude was having a little bit of a flaw that the services that he said that they are disabled and they were the cause of the problem that we were not able to access the servers. These services will prevent exec as well from accessing the servers remotely. So this was a flaw, and I asked it to correct it, and actually he did. And actually, even though the case was not that technical correct, but we have seen a lot of useful scripts to use. Okay, actually a lot of useful scripts as we have seen in the previous video. Today we will discuss another case which is, I hope it is much better, and actually it seems to be technically better, and we will try to read it out loudly, but this time we will not use the feature in Edge to read it loudly, but actually I have done or take advantage of a tool called Notebook LM from Google. I have already took the whole case and paste it in Notebook LM of Google and ask it to generate an audio overview of this case. Actually, it's very good, and actually the scenario or the audio is very useful and very seems to be alive, like it is a podcast. Let me show you how this is very useful and very actually I am astonished from the result. So let's see the case. The case today is called the exec Chronicles Emergency Deployment. We will see this and try to see how the podcast will work. So here you go. Let's open this and open this. So here you go. This is the case and this is the podcast. Let's try to see how they will work together. So this will be the audio comments, and this will be the real situation or the real case. So let's see how this will work together. I hope you enjoy this scenario and enjoy this podcast as I actually have enjoyed it. So let's begin.
All right, so let's imagine, right? It's Monday morning and you walk into work, coffee's ready, you're kind of getting in the zone for the week, and bam, surprise security audit.
Oh, that's true.
And it starts tomorrow.
Not good.
Yeah, talk about a mood killer, right? Suddenly you're scrambling, looking at a mountain of updates that need to happen across like a zillion workstations, and you've got less than 24 hours.
I bet everyone listening has felt that panic at some point. Maybe not a security audit specifically, but that oh no moment when you realize you've got way too much to do and not nearly enough time.
Totally. And it's in those moments, under that kind of pressure, that you have to get creative, right? You've got to think outside the box, go beyond your usual tools and processes.
Absolutely. You need solutions, and fast.
Exactly. And that's what we're digging into today in this deep dive. We're going to break down a real-world situation, a true IT fire drill, where two pros had to do just that.
Love it. Real-world examples are always the best way to learn.
Right. So we've got this transcript here. It's called the PSEC Chronicles, Emergency Deployment. And it's basically a fly-on-the-wall account of how these two IT folks, Lowell and Maya, handled this crazy crisis.
So we're talking about practical, in-the-trenches knowledge here.
You got it. Our mission today is to really understand the power of this tool called PSEC. We're going to see how it can be a lifesaver for remote administration, especially when you're up against the clock.
I'm all about time-saving tools. Let's hear it.
Okay, so to set the stage, we're in scene 1 of our chronicle. Maya comes storming into the IT department, and you can practically see the stress radiating off of her.
Uh-oh. What's the bad news?
The security audit, remember? Well, it starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
And there are 47 workstations that are not compliant.
47.
That's a lot. They need a whole security software suite installed, local admin rights removed, and all these updated security policies applied.
Oof. Yeah, that's a huge task, especially with such a tight deadline.
Right. And the clock is ticking. Lowell starts crunching the numbers, and they realize that manually installing the security software on each workstation would take like 20 minutes per machine.
So, 20 minutes, 47 machines.
Over 15 hours of nonstop work.
Yeah.
Impossible to get it done in time.
No way, not a chance.
Not to mention, they have remote workers to think about, and, to make things even more fun, the finance department, which is notoriously locked down.
Ah, yes. Finance departments. Always a special challenge.
So manual installation is out of the question. And that's when Lowell, cool as a cucumber, suggests using PSExec.
PSExec. Interesting. So what is PSExec exactly, and why does Lowell seem so confident about it?
Well, it's a powerful tool for remote administration. But Maya's only ever used it for basic troubleshooting, so she's a little skeptical.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's always a little nerve-wracking to try a new tool in a high-pressure situation.
For sure. So scene 2 is called Planning the Deployment. Right off the bat, Lowell starts organizing things, because in this kind of situation, you need a plan. They break down the workstations into groups, local, remote, by department, that kind of thing.
Smart move. Got to get organized when you're dealing with that many machines.
Right. And the goals are clear. Install Security Suite 2.0. That includes endpoint protection, device control, vulnerability scanning, the whole works. Disable those local admin accounts, and make sure Windows logging is enabled for the audit.
Sounds pretty comprehensive, but Maya brings up a good point. Why not just use SCCM or group policy for the software deployment? Those are already set up, right?
Yeah, but Lowell explains that while those tools are great for ongoing management, they're not ideal for this kind of emergency. They have what's called propagation delays. It takes time for the software to get distributed and for the clients to actually install it.
Makes sense. You need something more immediate, something that can push commands and start installations right away.
That's where PSExec comes in. So normally the Security Suite installer has a graphical interface, right? You have to click through things. But Lowell, like the PSExec wizard he is, knows about silent installation parameters.
Silent installation.
Yeah, so you can run the installation without any user interaction. He tests it out locally first using this command. Security Suite 2.0.exe svqn addy local reboot. Really suppress a bit of a mouthful. I know.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Break it down for us.
Okay, so the S just means silent mode, no user prompts. The V lets you pass arguments to the MSI installer, which is what a lot of Windows software uses. And then within those quotes, QN tells the MSI installer to run completely silently, eddy local, make sure all the features get installed, and reboot really suppress stops the machine from restarting automatically.
Ah, so they can control the reboots later during the mass deployment.
Exactly. That's key. So after confirming that the silent installation works locally, they tried to do it remotely using PSExec. Their first attempt looks like this. P6 Finance PC01 SSC Server Installers Security Suite 2.0.exe SEQN AG Local Reboot Really Suppress.
Okay, walk us through that.
So SECSEC is the command, obviously. Then Finance PC01 is the name of the remote computer. This tells PSExec to run the command as a system account, which has like super admin privileges.
Right.
And DESVC tells it to copy the executable file from the server to the remote machine before running it. But here's the thing. All those nested quotes in the V parameter can really mess things up.
Ah, I see the issue. It's like trying to untangle a string of Christmas lights.
Exactly. It's way too complicated, especially for something like PSExec. So what do? They create a batch file. Simple and elegant.
Nice. A classic solution.
All right. It's called installsecurity.bat, and it just contains that whole silent install command, nice and clean. Then, instead of trying to pass the entire command line through PSExec, they just tell PSExec to copy and run the batch file. PSExec, finance PC01-SES, installsecurity.bat. Problem solved.
Very clever.
And it works. The software installs silently on the remote machine. But Maya brings up another important point. Just because it ran without errors doesn't mean it actually installed correctly. How do they know for sure that the security suite is up and running on that remote machine?
That's a great question. You can't just assume everything went perfectly.
Right. This takes us to scene 3, which is all about scaling the deployment. Now that they have a working method for one machine, the challenge is to apply it to all 47 workstations.
Yeah, time to get serious about automation.
Exactly. Thankfully, Maya has a CSV file with the names of all the computers, which is perfect for automating this whole thing. Lowell whips up a PowerShell script that can read this CSV file and go through each computer name using PSExec to do the installation remotely.
So combining PowerShell's scripting power with PSExec's remote execution capabilities.
Exactly. And this script has some really smart features built in. It even includes this function called test computer connection to check if a machine is online and reachable before trying to connect with PSExec.
That's good. Proactive error handling is always a good idea.
For sure. The last thing you want is for the script to crash because it hit an offline machine. And then comes the main part of the script, which is this for each loop that goes through each computer name in the CSV file. Inside the loop, it basically builds the psexec command to copy and run the install-security.bat file on each remote machine. The command looks like this. And psexec.exe.exe capio computer name, bsc batch file pass, nash f2 and 1. The ds is important here because it forces psexec to overwrite the file on the remote machine if it already exists.
Makes sense. You might need to rerun the script with an updated installer at some point.
Right. And they don't stop there. The script also uses psexec to grab the installation log file from each machine after the installation. It specifically looks for the line exitcode.0, which means the installation was successful.
So they're automating the verification process as well.
Exactly. Smart, right? The script even logs the results to a CSV file, so they have a record of what happened. And to make sure the script doesn't overwhelm the network, they add a start sleep command to pause briefly between each machine. But then they run into another issue: how to deal with the remote computers that aren't directly connected to the office network. PSExec needs to be able to directly access the target machine, so what do they do about the folks working from home?
That's a tricky one.
Right. So Lowell's solution is to create another PowerShell script called remoteinstall.ps1. This one is designed to be self-contained, and they can just send it to the remote users to run on their own machines.
So they're putting the users in control of the installation, but in a controlled way.
Exactly. This remoteinstall.ps1 script is pretty comprehensive. It automatically requests
So here let's go to this point. Here he is talking about it's so much sophisticated we did last week. We are deploying to dozens of very proper handling, so on. So what about the remote computers? How we will handle those? Remote computers are directly accessible on our network. We have a few options. So this will be done in the networks within their network, or done to the computers within their network. There are remote users sitting at home, and you need to also apply this batch to them, but actually PSExec will not be able to access remote machines with, for example, domain admin credentials maybe, or I don't know which credentials he will use to access these remote machines, but as far as I assume, it will use the domain admin account. So will this work on remote machines at home maybe? If there is a VPN and they are in the same network, I think maybe domain admin account will work. But anyway, here I think he will use maybe local administrators on the remote machines. So I think here check for admin rights and self-elevate if necessary. So I think he will use the local administrator account to do this process. Okay, as we see here, it will check for administrative privileges, and it will do a lot of things actually. So let's continue with the podcast and see what it will say.
admin privileges when it starts, downloads the Security Suite installer from the company network, does the silent installation, disables a local administrator account, enables the Windows firewall, sets up all the required auditing settings, and even reports back to a central server to let them know it's done. It also has good error handling built in, just in case something goes wrong.
Wow, that's impressive. It's like a self-installing, self-reporting package.
It is, right? So that's the remote workers taken care of. But in scene 4, handling special cases, they hit another snag. When they try to deploy to the finance department computers, they get access denied errors.
Of course.
Lowell figures those machines probably have some extra strict security settings.
Understandable. Finance departments tend to be very cautious about security, as they should be.
Absolutely. And this is where PSExec's interactive mode comes in handy.
Interactive mode, what's that?
So Lowell shows how to open an interactive command prompt on one of the finance machines, running as the system account. The command is psexec finance pc01 dsicmd. What this does is open a command prompt on your machine, but any commands you run in that prompt are actually executed on the remote finance machine with full system privileges.
Oh, that's powerful. It's like having a direct line to the remote machine with the highest level of access.
Exactly. But with great power comes great responsibility, right? Lowell makes a point of saying that they need to be very careful with this and always warn users before doing anything like this.
Absolutely. It would be pretty freaky for a user to suddenly see things happening on their screen without any warning.
Right. So Lowell then shows how to use the command exec finance PC01 query session to see who's logged onto the remote machine. The iSwitch can also be used to connect to a specific user session, so he shows how to target the console session, which is usually session ID 1, with the command exec finance PC01 maintenance I1 CM day. And then he does something really interesting. He runs the graphical installer for Security Suite interactively within session 1 as system. The command is psexec finance PC01 Bassinar 1 server installer security suite 2.zor.exe. So imagine you're the user sitting at that finance computer. Suddenly, the installer window pops up on your screen, even though it's being run with system privileges.
Wow. That's sneaky.
Right. It totally bypasses all the usual security restrictions. But again, it's super important to communicate with the user beforehand so they don't freak out.
Yeah, you don't want to give anyone a heart attack.
In Scene 5, they move on to the second big task, disabling the local administrator accounts on all the workstations.
Another crucial security measure.
Yep. And for this, they write another PowerShell script called
So let's wait here. He will run the security suite interactively. The user can see the install running, but we are controlling it remotely. It's a powerful capability, but used widely. User can be startled when applications suddenly launch on their machine. See powerful now. Should we warn they would be professional? Let's send a quick email explaining that they will see the install running but do not need to interact with it. So is this means that the user will need to run the software, or it will need to answer the questions for the security suite? For example, maybe tell him next or so and so, or the suite will configure or it will run automatically, not asking the user for any questions maybe. Well, I think maybe there is a parameter to make the user do not do any input. I think not silent, but I think something else, maybe putting some parameters to accept some configuration setting for this suite. Anyway, so as we see here, the podcast is fantastic from my point of view. Now he need to do something. He need to disable local administrators account. So start software deployment in progressing well. Maya is updating their tracking spreadsheet. We have got the software installed on 42 out of 47 machines. The remaining 5 are remote computers. We have sent them the self-installation script, the one that he have created before. Let's continue the podcast.
disabled nbin.ps1.
Another script. They're really cranking these out.
I know, right? They're on fire. This script is all about safety and making sure they don't accidentally lock anyone out.
Smart.
It checks if the administrator account exists and is enabled, and if so, it disables it. But then, and this is the clever part, it also checks.
So here he already installed the software, and then there is another script to disable the admin accounts. So this is for so he have already installed the software for all of the machines. Now he need to disable local administrator on all of the local machines and the remote machines. This is done using this account or this script.
Checks if the domain admins group still has admin privileges on the machine.
Wait, why is that check necessary?
Because sometimes administrative access isn't granted directly to the domain admins group. It might be through other groups, like an IT support group or something. So if the script can't confirm that domain admins has access, it actually re-enables the local administrator account just to be safe.
A fail-safe to prevent a lockout disaster. Very clever.
Right. Then they run this script across all the on-premises computers using psexec. The command looks like this.
So let's see here. I like the safety measures you have built in. It checks if domain admins still have access before committing to disable the administrator account. Okay, so he need to run the script to disable the local administrator account, and this will be done using the domain admin account. Okay, so here if checks the domain admin still have access before committing to so, because uh, maybe he don't have any other accounts, or the domain admin is disabled, so he will not be able to run the account. So here let's try to see the script from another view. Here is talking about disable local administrator account, and then verify our domain admin account still have access. Check if the domain admin is in the local administrator group. This is correct, so he can run the script. If we don't detect domain admin access, re-enable the local administrator account. This is a safety measure to prevent lockout. Domain admins are not verified, re-enable administrator. Okay, so what after re-enabling the administrator account? Uh, this can be a little bit tricky, saying that when making security changes, always include failsafe. The last thing we want is to lock ourselves out of this machine. So he just, if you don't have a domain admin access, okay, he need to re-enable uh, uh, the local administrator. How this will be done actually? Uh, First of all, he's talking about disabling the account. Verify our domain admin accounts still have access. Okay, so correct. It will not have access. If you don't have access, the administrator account will not be disabled, because you need administrative privileges to disable it. So this is a logical step. But anyway, he's talking about verifying it, you still have access. Check if domain admin is in the local administrator group. Okay, if we don't detect domain admin access, re-enable the administrator account. This is a safety measure to prevent lockout. So this is strange. Disable the account. This is correct. You will not disable the account unless you have the domain admin account verified. So I think there is a little bit of a mistake here. Anyway, so let's continue with the podcast, but I think you can only uh, make sure that the local administrator account is disabled, and uh, this is sure. If you have domain admin account is there, it for sure it will disable the local administrator account. Anyway, let's continue with the podcast and see how it will go.
Say exec at onpremises-computers.txt can s PowerShell exec to read the list of computers from a text file, run the PowerShell script as system, and ignore the usual execution policy restrictions. But even with all this, they still find a few machines where the script couldn't verify that domain admins had access, so the local admin account stays enabled on those.
So there are always edge cases, huh?
Oh, so I got here. Okay, I thought I got it. He will not apply the disable local admin account unless he verify that domain admins are in the local administrators group. So this is a good step, just to make sure before disabling the local administrator account and cut himself out of the machine. He need to make sure that the domain admin accounts are already in the local administrators group, so he can access them after you disable the local administrator account. Very, very clever. Okay, let's continue with the case.
You can't account for every single possibility.
Nope. To figure out what's going on with those problem machines, Lowell uses this command: text problem, PCU01 text net local group administrators, to see who actually has admin rights on one of the machines. And they discover that, yeah, the access isn't directly through domain admins. It's through these nested groups like IT support and a local sec admins group.
Ah, so their script needs to be adjusted to account for those different scenarios.
Exactly. Which brings us to the final stage, Scene 6, verification and reporting.
So he is saying that the machine has a custom security configuration. The domain admins group isn't directly a member of a local administrator group. Instead, they are using a group called IT support. Okay, so the domain admins are not part of the local administrators group. So you need uh, to add this group to the script, or ask the script to use this group to implement the disable local administrator account. So you have IT support and the local group called sysadmin. So it is safe to disable the local administrator account, yes, but let's modify our script to account for these variations. This is the thing you need to take care of.
With the audit just hours away, they need to make sure that everything is actually in place. Lowell writes yet another PowerShell script called verifycompliance.ps1 to check the status of each workstation and generate a nice HTML report.
A report for the auditors. Makes sense.
Yep. This script is pretty impressive. It checks if the security suite is installed, if the local administrator account is disabled, where applicable, if the firewall is enabled, and if the auditing settings are correct. It even calculates a security score for each machine.
So a fully automated compliance check.
Yep. Then they run this verification script against all the computers using the command.
Yeah.
Verify compliance.ps1-computer names, get content-path all computers.txt. And they discover a handful of machines that are only partially compliant, mainly because of the auditing settings.
So close, yet so far.
Right. To fix that, they use another ps-exec command to enable the required auditing settings on those machines remotely. ps-exec at partially-compliant.txt-s PowerShell-command. Body poll set category. Account logon success.enable-failure.enable. Audit poll set category. Account management success.enable-failure.enable. Audit poll set category. System success.enable-failure.enable. For the computers that were offline during the whole process, they create a batch file called fixoffline.bat that the IT staff can run in the morning if those machines come back online before the audit. This batch file basically does everything. Installs security suite, disables the admin account, sets up the auditing, and runs the verification script.
Wow, talk about thorough. They've really covered all their bases.
They have, right. In the last scene, reflecting on the process, Lowell and Maya take a breath and think about everything they just did. They both agree that PSX was the hero of the day. Without it, there's no way they could have gotten everything done in time.
It's always good to acknowledge your tools.
Totally. They also talk about the importance of using ps-exec responsibly and how it can sometimes get flagged by antivirus software because of its power. And they compare it to PowerShell remoting, which is another remote administration tool.
So what's the verdict? ps-exec or PowerShell remoting?
Well, it depends on the situation. ps-exec is super simple to use, especially for one-off tasks. But PowerShell remoting is more powerful and secure for ongoing management.
That makes sense. Different tools for different jobs.
Exactly. And Maya, always thinking ahead, decides to document the whole process and create a cheat sheet with all the ps-exec commands and scripts they used.
Always good to share the knowledge.
Right. So for you, listening, what's the big takeaway from the ps-exec Chronicles? We've seen how ps-exec can be a lifesaver in a crisis, allowing you to remotely manage and configure a whole bunch of machines quickly and efficiently.
And not just in emergencies. It can be useful for all sorts of everyday IT tasks.
Totally. Think about your own work. Where could you use the power of remote execution and automation? What tasks could you streamline or simplify?
It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. So our final thought for you. What other hidden gems are out there waiting to be discovered? In a world that's becoming more and more interconnected and reliant on automation, what other tools could you master to really boost your productivity and solve problems in new ways?
So I think very, very good explanation and podcast. As we see here, let me show this is our exercise, and here, or this is the case, and this is uh, how you can implement this scenario uh, in a virtual environment. Here we see these are the scripts, okay, to create in a virtual environment. Let me try to see if we have anything here. We can get this, or I can share this to you guys all. So this is the case, okay. So as you can see here, this is the whole case. Let me try to tell him something. Export the whole case. Let me try to get it in one file so I can get all of the scripts to you guys and put it in one file, the whole scenario or the whole case to be exported, and I will let you guys take or take this podcast, okay, and or use it to explain this topic or explain this case. Let me first try to tell him that one. So let's see if he will get he can do that. Just a moment, guys. So as we see, guys, here this is the case. He's trying to generate it in one markdown file. This is something like a PDF file. Okay, I'll try to upload this uh, in my Telegram channel. Okay, I put it as an attachment so you can all take the script and work, or to be this case documented so you can all use it. Okay, and then I'll try to generate another case, because actually I love this case. Actually, it's very simple and contains a lot of useful scripts. Let's try to see if we can generate another case. Okay, so what's good for the prompt that created this case, that I asked him to create a case and then give me the steps to create it in a virtual environment. Okay, so this is one good thing. As you can see here, this contains a lot of useful scripts, how to implement that in a Hyper-V environment. I think it also contained the steps to do it in a virtual box environment. Anyway, there is a lot of useful scripts, and actually the case can be documented and can be used as a good reference. Okay, so as we can see here, these are all useful scripts. uh, Amazing what the AI tools are offering these days. So as you can see here, this is the whole case. I think he has already done the whole thing here. Here is the whole case, and now he have the entire material and dialogue, and things uh, are already included. Okay, okay, let me tell him to create another case scenario. First of all, let me try to get this to be download as a markdown, and then save this and put it on my desktop. And now I will open my Telegram channel. Safely you can guys search for IT Visualizer. This is the channel. Okay, I will add this case. So now I will get this case to be, here you go, this is the case, PS exec deployment. Simply you can open this one by using Notepad, which is very good. You can open this file using Notepad++, and there is something called a plugin called Markdown Viewer. Just you can open it with this plugin, and now you can see the whole case. Okay, you can see here this is the whole case. If you don't like this, you can also see it through the Notepad++. As you can see here, this is the whole script, the whole scenario. Okay, as you can see here, a lot of things and a lot of useful scripts. So this is how we can use this case. And now let's try to tell him to allow. Okay, so okay, I think I have already done this before. So now we tell him to create another case scenario, and let's see how this will go. So I think the case will be good. Let's wait and see how this case will be generated. First of all, let's close this one and try to see how this case will be generated. First of all, let's go there and see. Let's pause for a moment until the case is ended, and then we will see how we can read it, or how this case is good or bad. So let's see, guys. This is another case created called PS exec chronicles security incident response. I have already took the whole case and again make it like audio podcast. Let's see how this will work, okay, and how this case will appear. So if here you go, this is the whole case. Let's try to read the podcast first. Let's make it more than, or let me try to make the audio louder, so we have it like 125%, and then let's try to read the case out loudly.
Okay, so you know how this works, right? You bring us the puzzle pieces, those raw sources, and we try to put them together and see what picture emerges.
It's like we're building a custom knowledge map, specifically for you.
Exactly. And today we're diving into a pretty unique situation, almost like we're getting a secret recording of a security incident as it unfolded in a real IT department.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. The source material basically lays out the timeline from the first hint that something was off all the way through to their initial response.
Picture this. It's Friday afternoon, everyone's looking forward to the weekend, and then bam, all of a sudden, Lowell and Maya in IT get hit with a bunch of alerts all at once.
And not just any alerts. These are multiple servers acting up, like 3 of their main application servers, APP01, APP02, and APP03.
Ugh, yeah. Weird processes running, attempts to connect to external addresses, the works. I mean, that's got to send chills down any IT pro's spine, right? It's like having all your alarm bells going off at the same time.
You know something's wrong, but you're not quite sure what yet. And what I found really interesting was how Lowell reacted to this. Instead of immediately going into lockdown mode, isolating everything, he took a different approach.
More of a, let's gather more intel before we make any sudden moves kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a tricky situation because on the one hand, you need to figure out what's going on fast, but you also don't want to tip off the attacker if there is one. Or worse, accidentally mess up any potential evidence that you might need for a forensic investigation later on.
It's like walking a tightrope, isn't it? You got to be super careful with every step. And I think Maya brought up a really good point during this whole thing. She was like, hey, shouldn't our security tools have caught this already? And this brings up that whole concept of living off the land attacks. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Sure. So imagine you've got a spy, right? And instead of bringing all their fancy gadgets and weapons, they decide to use whatever they can find at their target's location. The target's car, their phone, even their food.
So they're blending in, basically using everyday objects to achieve their goals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Living off the land in cybersecurity is kind of like that. Attackers use legitimate tools and processes, stuff that's already present on the system and often used by administrators, to carry out their attacks.
So it's harder to spot them because they're not using any obviously malicious software?
That's the whole point. It makes it much trickier for traditional security solutions, the ones that rely on blacklists and signatures, to detect them. It really highlights how attackers are getting more sophisticated and stealthy in their methods.
So instead of trying to break down the door, they're already inside, using your own tools against you.
Right. And for anyone listening, this means you need to start thinking differently about security. You can't just focus on blocking known bad files anymore. You need to pay attention to how legitimate tools are being used and look for any unusual or suspicious behavior.
It's like, don't just guard the front door. Watch out for someone sneaking in through the back window.
Exactly. So getting back to Lowell and Maya, they decide their first move is to use a tool called PSEC. Now, what's so special about this particular tool in this scenario?
Well, PSEC is part of the SICE internal suite, right? And it's this really powerful set of tools for Windows administrators. I've used it myself a bunch of times. It's super helpful.
And in this case, PSEC allows them to remotely run commands on those potentially compromised servers without actually logging in directly, like using a full remote desktop connection.
So it's a more stealthy way to investigate. They're not leaving any obvious footprints.
Precisely. They're not triggering any login events or generating a bunch of network traffic that might alert the attacker. Think of it as getting a peek inside the room before you decide to actually walk in.
I like that analogy. So they fire up PSEC and they decide to first run another tool called CSList on APP01. What are they hoping to find with that?
PSList basically gives them a snapshot of every process that's currently running on that server. It's a simple command, but it can provide a ton of valuable information.
Right, so they're looking for anything out of the ordinary.
Exactly. And almost right away, Maya notices something strange. There's a PowerShell process running under a command prompt that's been active for about 5 minutes. Now, in a normal server environment, that's kind of unusual.
Why is that a red flag? I mean, PowerShell is a legitimate tool, right?
It is. But long-running PowerShell processes, especially ones that seem to have been started manually, can be a sign of malicious activity. It's not something you typically expect to see on a server unless someone was intentionally running it.
Okay, so now they've got this suspicious PowerShell process. What's their next move to figure out what it's actually doing?
They need to dig a little deeper and figure out the exact command that launched this process. So they use a command called row-orb-imic process, and they specify the process ID, or PID, of that suspicious PowerShell process, which is 2520 in this case.
So they're basically asking the system, hey, what are the instructions for this specific process? What's it actually supposed to be doing?
Exactly. They're trying to get the command line arguments that were used to start that process. And what they find is pretty interesting. The command line shows that PowerShell is being used, but with some weird parameters.
Like what?
Well, there's NOP, which means no profile, and then there's DO.
So as we can see here, that he had already got the PowerShell suspicious case or suspicious process, and then he used something called psinfo. He used another case to call psinfo. So banner process. Okay, he didn't use psinfo actually. He used WMIC. So this also can be a good thing to get the get command line. So I think maybe he should change this WMIC to psinfo. Anyway, let's see. I think this is the correct one because I have already used it before. So WMIC process so and so, it will get the command line, and then we can see here this suspicious because PowerShell with NOP for no profile, W hidden to hide the window, and E for encoded command. Let's decode that BS64 base string. So let's see the podcast.
Hidden, which tells PowerShell to run in a hidden window. But the most important one is I.
What does E do?
That stands for encoded command. And what that means is that the actual command being run is hidden inside this long, complicated string of characters.
So it's like a secret message.
You could say that.
Yeah.
It's a common tactic attackers use to try to obscure their intentions. They encode their commands so that they don't trigger any alarms or get flagged by automated security tools.
Clever, but not foolproof, right?
Not at all. Lowell immediately recognizes this and realizes it's likely base64 encoding. And base64 is a pretty standard way of representing binary data as text. It's not really encryption. It's more like a way to format data so that it can be easily transmitted or stored.
So anyone can decode it if they know how.
Right, and Lowell knows exactly how. He copies that encoded string, uses PowerShell on his own secure machine, and runs a simple command to decode it back into plain text. And that's where things start to get really interesting.
So what was the hidden command? What was the attacker trying to do?
Well, the decoded command reveals that it's actually downloading a file from a specific internal IP address, 192.168.11.1 a euro, and the file it's downloading is called payload.exe. That right there is a huge red flag.
Oh yeah, payload.exe doesn't sound good at all.
Definitely not. And to make matters worse, the command is saving this file into the ctemp directory and renaming it to sysmin.exe. And you know what sysmin is, right?
It's a legitimate system monitoring tool from Microsoft. So they're trying to disguise their malware as a harmless system file.
Exactly. It's a classic tactic to try to blend in and avoid detection. And as soon as Maya sees this, she knows they're dealing with a real security incident, no doubt about it.
So they've got this malicious file downloaded and disguised on one server. What about the other two?
They immediately check APP02 and APP03 using the same pslist command. And unfortunately, they find very similar suspicious PowerShell processes running on those servers as well.
So 3 servers, all compromised. Not a good situation at all. Now, what's their next move?
They need to confirm that the downloaded file is actually on those servers and gather more information about it. So they use exec again, but this time with some simple commands like ifitgives to check for the presence of the file in the ctemp directory.
And add to get the details about it, like the file size, the creation date, all that stuff.
Precisely. And what they find is that the creation timestamp of sysmin.exe on all 3 servers perfectly lines up with the timing of those initial security alerts they received. That's a pretty strong indicator that this file is indeed the culprit.
And while they're poking around in that directory, they find a couple of other suspicious files.
Oh yeah, they spot a config.dat file and another small file called .lock. They decide to try and take a look inside config.dat using the type command.
Hoping to find some clues about what this malware does, right?
Exactly. But what they find is pretty unexpected. Instead of malicious code or configuration data, they discover something called the ICAR test string.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. What is the ICAR test string?
So ICAR stands for the European Institute for Computer Antivirus Research. And they created this special test file that's designed to be detected by pretty much every antivirus program out there. But it doesn't actually do anything harmful. It's just a way to test if your antivirus is working properly.
So why would the attacker include this in their malware?
That's a good question. There are a couple of possibilities here. One is that they were testing the waters, seeing how well the company's defenses were working. If the ICAR string didn't trigger any alerts, it could indicate weaknesses in their security posture.
So it was a way for them to probe the environment without revealing their full hand.
Exactly. Another possibility is that they were trying to throw off investigators or create a distraction.
Interesting. So at this point, they've confirmed the malware on 3 servers, but they manage a lot more than just 3, right?
Yeah, they've got a whole network of servers to worry about. So to efficiently check the others, Lowell creates a simple text file called servers.txt and lists all their server names in it.
Smart. So they don't have to type out each server name individually every time.
Exactly. Then he uses a really handy feature of exec. It allows you to target multiple computers at once by using the @ symbol followed by the file name. So he runs that same ifexist command, but this time targeting all the servers listed in servers.txt.
And I'm guessing the results weren't good.
Unfortunately, no. The output showed that 2 of their database servers, DB01 and DB02, were also infected with that same sysmin.exe file.
Ugh, the database servers. That's definitely not what you want to see. So now the situation is getting even more serious. What's their next step?
They need to figure out what this malware is doing on the network. Are these infected servers talking to an external machine controlled by the attacker?
Right. So they need to look at network connections.
Exactly. And for that, they use another handy tool from the SICE internal suite called TCPview. But instead of using the graphical interface, they use the command line version, tcpbcon.exe.
And they use exec to run this remotely on APP01.
Right. They use specific commands with tcpvcon to capture all active network connections and save that information to a file called connections.csv. And then they simply use the type command to view the contents of that file.
So what does that network data tell them?
Well, it reveals a couple of really important things. First, they see that the sysmin.exe process on one of the infected servers, and it has a specific PID, 3956, is establishing connections to an external IP address, 10.5.14.22.
So that could be the attacker's command and control server?
It's very likely. And what's more, it's using HTTPS, which is the same protocol used for secure websites, to communicate. That makes it harder to detect and block.
So it's basically hiding in plain sight, using normal web traffic to communicate.
Exactly. They also noticed that the original PowerShell process with PID 2520 is still active and connected to that internal IP address, 192.168.1.100, where that initial malicious file was downloaded from.
So they've got this backdoor established, and they're talking to some unknown external entity. Pretty scary stuff. What's next on their to-do list?
Well, they need to figure out if this malware is going to come back, even if they restart the servers.
Yeah.
They need to find out if it's set up any persistence mechanisms.
So it can automatically reinfect the systems.
Exactly. And for this, they check two common places where malware likes to hide in Windows. The first is the Windows registry.
What are they looking for in the registry?
They use exec and the regquery command to look at specific keys under HKLM software Microsoft Windows current version run. These are called run keys, and any program listed there will automatically launch when the computer starts up.
So it's like a startup list.
Right. And what they find is an entry called Security Center that points directly to C tempsysmon.exe.
Ah, so that's how the malware is going to restart itself. It's disguised as a legitimate security program.
Exactly. And they also check for scheduled tasks using exec and the tasks command.
Scheduled tasks.
Yeah. These are tasks that are set to run automatically at specific times or intervals. And they find a task that's disguised as something called Microsoft Windows System Health System Monitor, but it's actually configured to run that malicious sysmon.exe file.
Double whammy. So even if they clean up the registry, the scheduled task will just bring the malware back.
Right. They've got multiple layers of persistence to deal with.
So let's recap. They've got malware on multiple servers, external communication, and ways for it to come back. What do they do now?
At this point, they need to carefully collect forensic evidence before they do anything that might disrupt or destroy it.
Like it's a snapshot of the compromised systems.
Precisely. So their first move is to create a dedicated folder on one of the infected servers called C evidence. They'll store all the evidence there.
And then they use exec to remotely run another sysinternals tool called procdump.
Right. Procdump is really useful for capturing memory dumps of running processes. And they use it to grab a full memory dump of the sysmon.exe process, which has the PID 3956.
So that memory dump will contain a ton of information about what the malware was doing at that exact moment.
It's like a frozen picture of the malware in action. Very valuable for analysis later on. They also use exec and the copy command to copy the actual malware files, sysmon.exe and config.dat, into that evidence folder.
And what about logs? They're going to need those too, right?
Oh yeah, system logs are crucial for incident response. So they use exec again, this time with the webtoodle command. This allows them to remotely export the important logs, like the system, security, and application event logs.
So they're copying all these logs and files into this evidence folder. What do they do to make sure everything is organized and secure?
They use exec to remotely run a PowerShell command that zips up that entire evidence folder and password protects it. This makes it much easier and safer to transfer that evidence for analysis without risking any accidental changes.
Smart move. Now, remember that internal IP address 192.168.1.100 where the initial download came from. They're going to want to take a closer look at that machine, right?
Absolutely. But when Lowell tries to run pslist on that machine using exec, he gets an error message. It says something like, the program is incompatible with the operating system.
That's weird. So it's not a Windows server.
It seems not. So Lowell tries a very simple command, hostname. It just asks the machine to identify itself, and the response comes back, Kali.
Kali, as in Kali Linux.
Yep, and that's a big deal because Kali Linux is a popular operating system used by penetration testers and security researchers, but also by attackers.
Oh no, so they've got an unauthorized machine running Kali Linux on their internal network.
And it was the source of the initial malware download. That changes everything.
Okay, things are definitely heating up now. Multiple infected servers, external communication, persistence mechanisms, and in a rogue Kali machine. Time for containment, right?
Absolutely. They need to move fast and hit this problem from multiple angles. They need to stop the malicious processes, remove those persistence mechanisms, block communication with the attacker's server, isolate that Kali machine, and clean up all the malicious files.
So a lot to do. How do they manage all of that?
Lowell starts by creating a batch script called cleanup.bat. This script contains commands to kill the sysmon.exe process, delete that registry run key, remove the scheduled task, and delete the malware files from the ctemp directory.
And they use exec to run this script on all the infected servers.
Right. While that's happening, Maya contacts their networking team. They need to block that external IP address at the firewall and immediately isolate that Kali machine from the network. It's all hands on deck at this point.
A coordinated response. So after the cleanup script runs, how do they know if it actually worked?
They use exec again to run some verification commands. They use task list to see if sysmon.exe is still running, and if it exists, to double-check that the malicious file is gone.
So they're making sure the malware is really gone.
Exactly. With the immediate threat contained, they now need to figure out how this all started in the first place. They already know that the initial download came from their IT tools server.
Right. They need to find out how that server was compromised.
So Lowell starts digging into the PowerShell event logs on one of those infected servers. Using PSExec and WebToodle, he looks for events that show the execution of PowerShell commands. And he finds something interesting. A record that the administrator account downloaded and ran a script called maintenance.ps1 from the IT tool server.
So that's how it all started. That script must have been compromised somehow.
That's what they need to find out. They use PSExec to connect to the IT tools server and then use the type command to view the contents of that maintenance.ps1 script. And when they look at it, they discover that alongside some legitimate maintenance tasks, it also contains a hidden command to download another PowerShell script called backdoor.ps1 from that Kali machine.
So the attacker hid their malicious code inside a legitimate script.
Sneaky, isn't it? And when that script was run on the other servers, it pulled down that backdoor and gave the attacker a foothold. But how did the attacker modify the script on the IT tool server in the first place?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
They need to find out who made those changes. So they look at the security event logs on the IT tool server, specifically events that show file modifications. And they use PSExec and WebTool to filter those events and pinpoint the user who modified maintenance.ps1.
And who was it?
It turned out to be a user account, CRP J. Smith.
Was that someone in the IT department?
No, it was an external contractor who had been working with their development team. And further investigation revealed that J. Smith's credentials were likely stolen in a phishing attack.
Ah, so that's how the attacker got in. They used those stolen credentials to access the IT tool server and modify that script.
It all connects, doesn't it? A phishing attack leads to stolen credentials, then the modification of a legitimate script, then the deployment of a backdoor, and ultimately full-blown compromise.
It's like a chain reaction. And in their post-incident review, they talked about what they learned from this whole ordeal and how they can improve their security posture to prevent something like this from happening again.
Yeah, one of their biggest takeaways was the importance of a quick response. The fact that they acted fast likely saved them from a lot more damage.
They also talked about the need for more proactive security measures, right?
Exactly. They realized that they can't just rely on reacting to incidents after they happen. They need to be more proactive in searching for potential threats. So Lowell created a new PowerShell script called securitycheck.ps1.
What does that script do?
It's designed to look for various signs of compromise, like suspicious PowerShell commands with encoded content or hidden windows. It also checks for unexpected files and temporary directories, unauthorized entries in those registry run keys, suspicious scheduled tasks, and unusual network connections.
So basically, it's looking for all the things they discovered during this incident.
Right. And their plan is to use PSExec to run this script regularly on all their servers. They'll probably also set up scheduled tasks for automated checks.
So they're building in some early warning systems.
Precisely. They also talked about the need to better monitor their network for unauthorized devices, like that Kali machine. And they want to implement stricter controls over who can modify important scripts and configurations.
So closing those security gaps.
Right. This incident was a wake-up call for them. It made them realize that even legitimate tools like PSExec can be dangerous in the wrong hands. And it underscored the importance of continuous learning in cybersecurity, keeping up with the latest threats and techniques.
So there you have it. We took a deep dive into a real-world security incident response case, albeit one presented as a script. We saw how the IT team investigated the initial alerts, used tools like PSExec to uncover the attacker's methods, discovered that rogue Kali machine, and ultimately contained the threat and cleaned things up.
What I found really impressive was their systematic approach. They didn't panic. They didn't make any rash decisions. They carefully gathered information, used the right tools for the job, and took decisive action at the right time.
It's a great example of how important it is to have a plan in place, to know your tools, and to stay calm under pressure. And for you, our listener, we hope this deep dive gave you a better understanding of how security incidents unfold and how they can be handled effectively. We talked about some key concepts like living off the land, the clever ways attackers try to hide their activities, and the importance of proactive security measures.
Now, here's a thought-provoking question for you to ponder. Think about the tools you use every day, whether for work or personal use. Could those tools be misused by someone with malicious intent? What steps can you take to protect yourself and your organization from similar threats?
It's definitely something to think about. We encourage you to keep exploring these topics, learn more about incident response best practices, and familiarize yourself with powerful tools like the Synsternal suite. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey.
Perfect, 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 perfect. I don't see, or I see this is the future of learning, okay? Just to create scenarios and make AI to make it like a podcast. Actually, very, very good way of learning. Actually, the case itself, guys, I have already got this as also markdown file. I will export it. Here you go, and I will save it and also put it uh, in my Telegram channel. So here you go. This is also the case. I will get a document, and then here is PS exec security, and here you go. This is also the case that contains all of the scripts. Okay, so as we can see here, this is a lot, contains all of the scripts that was introduced in this case. And actually the case seems to be very, very logic, even though I am not an IT security or specify, or I'm not a specialist in IT security, but this seems to be very, very logic, and the case seems to be very, very well done. So that concludes for our video. I need your opinion about this way of learning. If you uh, need me to do similar things like that, please put that in the comment. Hope this video informative to you all, guys, and thank you all for viewing. With God will, in the upcoming video we'll try to see other tools from Windows Sys internal suite, which are very, very important, okay, that can help us to troubleshoot Windows remotely. Thank you so much.